What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and if you guys missed out on the last video, we have officially started a brand new fully in-depth series on how to turbo and boost your NA Nissan 300ZX. So basically we've got Matt's car here. Matt found me here on YouTube, like you guys, and he reached out to me and asked if I could do this to his car and, you know, give it new life, give it some more power and get it all sealed up and ready to go. So here's all of our parts. We've got our full NATT swap right here, with the exception of turbos. Timing kit, wiring harness, bunch of goodies, motor mounts, boost controller, you name it, we probably got it. So last video, we went over taking everything out here on the front end of the car so we could kind of show you guys how to work your way in. So we can now, in this video, pull the motor, pull the transmission, and get all of the drivetrain out of the car and get the engine on the stand. So next video, we can tear it down, clean it up, time it, reseal it, do all that. Then the next video, we should be able to start putting the turbo stuff on it. So if that's something you guys are interested in seeing, don't forget to stay tuned to the channel, because we're trying to pump out some videos this year so we can get to our 3,000 sub goal by the end of the year. Technically it was 2,500. We beat that, blew that out of the water a couple months ago, so we had to bump it up. But before we do much of anything, since we're pulling the transmission out today, that means the rear has to come up on blocks. If you don't know what to lift your Z on, I always lift the rear by the diff brace. This guy right here, this is where I jack from. And for the front, I always use the subframe. Use a block of wood to cushion the squish between metal and metal and allow that wood to squish and take all the damage. But let's go ahead and get this thing on blocks and let's quit talking. Now that we're up on blocks, I've decided we're actually gonna start with the top of this car. We're gonna get pretty much everything off in preparation to pull the motor to where we can just go to the bottom and then knock that all out. Step number one, let's disconnect the battery. If we can. I've never, wow, is that just like some kind of quick release? Yo, that's sick. I need to find out more about that. That's amazing. So here we've got a 5mm Allen key. Remove all 4 of your Allen bolts from your timing cover. They could be 10mm if someone has replaced them. Now we're gonna take a 14mm and you're gonna crack this front nut loose just enough to be able to pop it out. You'll do the same thing with the throttle cable. To remove your cable, you're gonna have to pull your cruise first. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter first, but you have to pull your throttle back to get the cruise out, because if not, it's just gonna block it to slide out. I always just pull these and like tuck them right here behind the headlight. Can't scratch anything, isn't gonna do any damage. Ideally, you're just gonna wanna pull this one off just because it's gonna get in the way. If you do, it's literally 2 bolts and a connector right here. Now we're on to the balance tube. This should be a spring clamp, but this is a hose clamp. Assume it's been, replaced with the non-OEM hose. Now you want a 12mm socket and crack these 2 acorn nuts and this acorn nut and both of these bolts. Once those are all out, you're gonna want to come over here to your idle air control and remove this hard line if it's bolted up. Basically, this bracket is on top. You can get it off, but it's gonna move a lot better if you loosen this up a bit. And then you're not gonna bend this and make it way harder to go on the next time. That's how your bolt holes get stripped right here on the plenum. Now that that bolt's off, look how much it moves. Disconnect your fuel damper, or dampener, whatever. And I can't even remember what that is. That's probably AIVs. This bracket over here may be tough. If it won't pull up and pop off, loosen that 10mm up too. We will be in the end anyways. Okay, so there's a problem. So the fuel dampener is bad. Basically, I just pulled that hose off and my finger got wet with fuel. So that's gonna need replaced. Although they're not entirely needed when you upgrade. Sorry, my hair is annoying right now. I need a haircut bad, but a Walbro usually doesn't pulsate that bad and they don't really need a fuel damper, but I usually run one anyways. You're gonna lift up on this side. All you're trying to do is get it off that stud and then it'll slide out from that idle air control hard pipe. If you got your hose loose, twist and pull. You also have a small vacuum hose with a spring clamp. This goes to your carbon canister. Remove that as well. And then remove. Now is the fuel rail. And that's pretty much just this hard line right here. You can see this hose is cracked, split, kind of old. This is original right here. We have improper hose clamps. So basically all we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut these lines. There's no reason not to do this. If you're doing this whole swap, do yourself a favor, replace your fuel lines, upgrade to gates barricaded, because the whole premise of this build is around E85. Stock lines can't handle it, old original ones, but I highly recommend just do your fuel lines. It's not that big of a deal, especially for peace of mind that you don't burn your car down. Let's remove our 10 mils. If you're not gonna remove them, remove that fuel line down there with a Phillips and remove this line right here and pull that off, and then you can kind of pry this one up and out and pop it off the fuel rail. You don't have to remove these, you can just pull this, or you can just pull it all and hang it out the way. I'm removing it all since we're replacing it. And if this one's really stuck, there's like a little tab below it that stops it so you can't put it on too far. You can kind of pry against that and scoot your hose up. Disconnect your vacuum line source and we can pull it off. Before we move on to the wiring harness portion of this, I'm actually going to remove our brake booster hose and our full idle air control hose. So that way we get a little bit more room over here, and we just disconnect the rest of the hoses from the plume. I'm sure we got a couple on those little brackets on the side, but I'm not sweating that. We'll just chop, chop. So these injectors are actually converted to new style. So they're just a push tab that pop and pull off. These are ideal. These are much easier to get off. They're almost like these coil packs, except the tab is broken. These ones just slide off. So you'll have 6 of those back here, and it's so much easier to get to once your fuel rail and balance tube is off. Now, if you have early style fuel injectors, you're gonna have a clip or a connector, kind of like this coolant temp one in the front. Well, it should look like this. The way to remove these is you put a pick right here on this flat side. And this one from Harbor Freight is my favorite one to do so. So you go under the clip, go in, pull it back, and you pop it back from that tab right there. But when you're doing those down in these tight spaces and you need to keep that connector clip, this is going to be your best friend. Basically, as you pry it off, just keep this magnet resting there, pry it, magnet catches it nearly every time. Those clips are like $10 now, something absolutely absurd, so save them at all costs. Now, while disconnecting all your coil packs and stuff, you will have a spade over here for a fuel rail temp sensor, just like you have up here on the front. As far as the PTU goes, you can actually just unplug these newer style connectors that have the push style clip. So then you can just pull your harness out of the way. We have a brand new harness, so we're going to be bypassing these. These are very commonly to corrode because this right here breaks. You can see the green in there. So this has been exposed to moisture and is probably not working 100% properly. About like this coolant temp sensor. To get it the rest of the way off, you got to disconnect your crank angle sensor. You're going to pry your cast clip up and over enough to at least just unplug it. And you can just put your clip back in place so it's ready when you put it back on, but that is not mandatory. Once all of our injectors and coils are unplugged, you're going to have a ground right here by your cylinder 6 coil pack. Well, you should. It appears ours is broken. We may be able to drill and tap that for him, but he has it ran over here instead, hooked up to the other ground that is right here. Oh man. Oh, are you kidding me? Looks like we definitely got to drill and retap there, unless we utilize this one. Dang, why is this thing so crusty? It's got all the undershrouding on it. Oh well, that's just work for another day. You also have your idle air back here, or auxiliary air I should say. And then you have this 2-wire connector, which should, yeah, this is not hooked up right. This should be your NOx sensor, but apparently it's hooked up to your VTC. But your VTC runs on the same wire harness right here at your O2 connector. I wonder how this thing was running beforehand. I guess I should probably text Matt and ask. This harness right here that comes to your cylinder 6 injector, your auxiliary air, and your NOx sensor. These are all on one. Over here, coming off your 4 and 6 coil pack and your ground, you're gonna have this little wiring harness that it has its own 2 wires, connectors I should say. 2 wires, the VTC, the 3 wire is your O2. And those both should be mounted right here. So back here, we're gonna have a yellow and a blue connector. These are gonna be probably the 2 hardest ones to get to on your whole car. And if you have this thing in place, push down on the tab and slide it off and kind of move it where you need. Most of the time, these are not in place, so don't worry if you don't have it. We're actually gonna look at Josh's here as an example, since I can't really show you guys because it's really hard to see. But this right here is your actual idle air control. This is gonna be your yellow connector. You're gonna use that same hook to get down here, pop this little clip off and catch it with a magnet. Down here, this blue one is your fast idle control. So when you hit your heat or AC, this is what raises your idle couple hundred RPM to account for the extra load and to keep your car going. This blue plastic means blue connector, black plastic, yellow connector. Once you get all that disconnected and you're moving on to the passenger side, with the exception of the TPS, we're gonna pull this 10 mil so we can disconnect this bracket and kind of pull it out the way. And I completely disregarded this connector down here. So I'm pretty sure this is your EGR connector. This is for your EGR solenoid that your vacuum runs up here to your throttle body and then back to your EGR. We're deleting all this. We don't care about any of this, so we're just gonna disconnect that connector and pull it up. And I completely forgot to mention as well, you have another one on the same piece down there. Now, if you're replacing the wiring harness, you can just snip it, or you can wait till you pull it out and you got the engine up higher, so you actually have access to just straight up remove it. You also have a connector back here for your AIV. So actually the best method here is to unplug your wiring harness from this O2 and VTC and actually disconnect the wiring harness from the bracket, but leave the bracket hooked up to the VTC and the O2 in place, because if not, they're still stuck together and it's not gonna come out. Now last but not least, you have your oval TPS connector. It just has a typical push tab connector like all your coil packs. And then your TPS hard idle switch is going to have one of these clip connectors. So now that we got the wiring harness separated from the bracket and completely pulled over here and out of the way, one of the last things we have to do up here really, we're gonna loosen our heater core lines with an 8 mil and pretty much just get them ready so when we pull the motor, that all we have to do is pop them off. With the exception of the power steering pump and the AC compressor, we're not gonna pull them off just yet. I think we're gonna do that when we go to pull the actual motor. When you lift it up a little bit, they both have some give to where when they get up in a manageable position, you can just take them off. I'm removing the AC compressor as a whole because I'm not gonna discharge the system right now. I have to have a friend come by and do that because I don't have the equipment to do so. And I'm not just gonna let it go up into the atmosphere. You shouldn't either. Think about your kids and their kids. But now, since we're pretty much done up here, the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pull a couple coil packs. Now we're only doing this because when I pull my engine, I run the chain between this runner and this runner. It keeps it the most even, level, and it's sturdy, tough. I know it's gonna work. Let's begin getting underneath the car. So first off, we're gonna have to start with exhaust. And if you guys watch my channel, you know I hate taking off exhaust. Also, another big disclaimer, I have an impact. I know you guys might not. It's doable with a ratchet, but the impact just makes my life so much easier. We're probably gonna use a breaker bar to break it loose. And if it's all good and good threads, we'll use the impact to get it the rest of the way. Upon first glance down here, it appears we have a really bad rear main seal leak. We've got oil just covering absolutely everything, and it looks like it's even coming outside of the shift boot. Now, that shift boot is installed incorrectly. That's on backwards. That boot part is supposed to go inwards. So we will fix that. We'll definitely clean all that up. But for now, we've just got these 3 manifold bolts. There's one of them. That's aftermarket. And they should be 14 mil. Now, PB Blaster or running the car, letting it get warm is ideal so you can get it hot and kind of loose, especially if they haven't came off in a while. Since we're not using these and we're using twin turbo downpipes that mate to these test pipes, we're not going to need these bolts or flanges or anything. So we're just going to impact them, break them, snap them, whatever we have to do to get them off. Usually they break, and that's why I'm not taking the time to be extra careful. We're here to, swap this stuff out. If you have a 93 and earlier, you're going to have these AIV pipes with an 8 mil. and you'll need to disconnect this from your test pipe. Loaded up the cannon, fingers crossed. And it's not a factory bolt. For some reason, this was actually a 13 instead of a 14, even though it's a factory bolt. Not sure how that happened. This side came out, this side broke. Well, this side came out with that big bolt. But now we're gonna move back to the cat side and we're gonna see what it's looking like. Once we're back here to the cat section, these bolts right here are what we're gonna be pulling out. There's gonna be 4 between the two, but we need to pull this cross brace off. Should be 4 12 millimeters. It appears this was holding up some exhaust weight. As you can see the rub marks here, not good. So it either needs to be adjusted higher or we just need to not run this, because if not, that's just gonna rub a hole right into that exhaust. And for your catalytic converter bolts, these are just gonna be some 14 millimeters. Complete success on this test pipe over here. However, if you have issues like me and someone's replaced it with a nut on the back, I could not get this off. Seriously, I was scratching my head forever. I realized, try to take the other one off to get access, and well, that's exactly what we did. Don't know why I didn't think of that, but we took this one off. We've got access to it now, so we can put a wrench on this side while we loosen the back, and then we can pull them out. Yeah, quite the oil spillage going on here. This is going to be real fun to get this transmission out. Hope I don't ruin my sweatshirt. Next step is going to be the starter. To remove our starter, we've got a bolt or nut over here. It depends on your setup. It should come a stud and a nut from factory, but a lot of times it's replaced with a bolt. And we've got a bolt right here in this little divot of the starter. They're both 14 mil. The best way to get the top one, no extension, and then the bottom one, you can use an extension if you want. If not, it should just go straight on. Before you get too crazy with it, you want to make sure that your battery's unhooked, and you're going to come back here and remove your power wire from your starter. This can be a 12, 13, or a 14 mil. I've all came across. This one appears to be a 13. And I always recommend going back with your hardware, as always, and reinstalling. Before your starter comes all the way out, you also have a trigger wire right here. So basically when you turn the ignition, this is where that signal goes to power the starter, or at least tells it to go. Apparently we got the nut on the top side. That is a first. Once all your hardware's out, you can pull your starter. You know, I totally forgot to mention at the beginning that this was a manual, so I'm not going to be able to tell you auto guys a whole bunch, but usually I pull the trans and the engine together on an auto car for what it's worth. Now we're going to pull these two 14 mils from our clutch slave cylinder, disconnect it from the trans. Next step, on the side of our manual trans, we're going to have a 2-wire oval connector, a red single wire connector that goes to our speed sensor, and we have this black box connector that has a tab on the side. All you're going to do is lift up and pull. So you lift up on this tab and slide it apart. Now we can snake all of this after we cut these zip ties from this clutch line. We can snake all this engine or transmission wiring up here to where it's just with the engine, and we can separate it from the transmission as a whole. Now here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 studs with nuts on them. And then here in the back little corners, we actually have 10 millimeter bolts. And then you got to kind of start one side, bend it a little bit, and then drop it down. Now, I did just notice something that I've never seen before. I never knew there was a greasable fitting up here for your U-joints. Never have I ever seen that. When we come back here to the rear end on the drive shaft portion, we're going to have 4 bolts holding the drive shaft to the diff flange. You can see right here between the sway bar, you can actually get a ratcheting wrench on it. Now this is how I have removed pretty much every single one. And you just loosen it, and the bolt shouldn't turn because it should get stuck on this part of the drive shaft at the end of the U-joint. Make sure your parking brake's on, make sure you're in gear, make sure you're chalked so you don't drive off and crush yourself. Once you have all 4 bolts and nuts removed, we can move on to our carrier bearing. Your carrier bearing is this piece right here Pretty much holds the center of your drive shaft and dampens the vibration. We need to remove these two 17 mils to drop it down. Then it'll separate from the diff flange back here. And as we bring this backside down here and out the way, we'll slide it backwards and slide the yoke out of the transmission, in turn removing the drive shaft. Your 17 mil. Pull out your hardware. Yeah, that almost conked me in the head. Good thing I had my hand there. But pretty much as soon as you start to let that down, the rear will disconnect, lift, twist. If it doesn't, just pull out and slide it backwards. And we now have our drive shaft removed. When it comes to pulling your shifter, what I like to do here so I don't have to touch anything in the car is I disconnect the striker rod, which should be a 12 mil on both sides, but it looks like we have an Allen and a 13 Teflon nut. And I like to remove each two bolts from each side of the shift linkage right here, so I can just leave the shifter in place and drop the transmission down separate and just leaving it all in here. Now we can remove all four of our 12 mil bolts. We're now fully disconnected. Once you start to tilt it downwards, please place a rag up here. If not, you may make a total mess on yourself as the gearbox tilts back. Gear oil can come out and make a mess. Place a rag. Now we're going to put the cup of the jack right here in the center of the gearbox by the center plate. Basically, that's going to help us balance it the best so we can keep this thing from rolling off. And now we can remove our 14 mil trans mount bolts. There's always a stripped bolt here, I swear. Let your jack down, your trans will drop with it. But I'm not ready for that yet, so we're just gonna lift it up. Now, before we go anywhere else, right up here behind your steering rack, that right there, that nut, it appears it's already loose. You're gonna remove that 14 mil right back there on both sides that are in turn connected to your engine mounts. We need to loosen these so the engine will tilt backwards to give us enough room to pull this transmission off of the clutch. If not, it'll get wedged in between the clutch and the firewall. Now that we got those engine mount nuts off, pretty much your transmission is going to have a bolt here, here on the back side, here, a little bit farther up the trans, about 6 inches, and then right on the very top of the trans. Now the one on the very top of the trans on the driver's side is arguably one of the hardest to get to. It's really not that hard if you have the right tools. So this right here is my favorite tool for the job. Arguably, some people say about 4 foot of extensions to get it from the back of the trans, like the tail housing. Yes, you can do that. You can go straight up at it. That's a pain in the butt. I remember doing that my first transmission pull. Gives me bad memories. What we have done since then is we have pretty much found out that about 1.5 feet of extension is perfect. You're on a swivel tip with a 14 mil on the end, preferably a 6-point socket. 12-point allows it to jump around a little bit and not really get a good bite. So I recommend a 6-point. Now I prefer to go at the side of the gearbox to get these bolts out. So I'm going to show you guys how I pull one. I'm going to pull all of them I just showed you, and then we'll move to the passenger side. So lowering your trans will help give you some more clearance, obviously. I know you guys cannot see that well because it's dark and I have the light focused here, but what seems like is impossible to get to with a normal set of tools is just easy with a swivel. So I rather get them started with my hands just to get them started on the bolt before I start torquing it off. I'm pushing against the gearbox to kind of leverage it to crack it loose. And just like that, we got a bolt out. And a ratcheting wrench is best for these small bolts here on the back side, and even sometimes these ones right here that are easy to access. Reaching into the abyss just to pull out that very top bell housing bolt. Yeehaw. Now for over here on the passenger side, you've got this long bolt right here. You got another one on the back of the gusset plate. You have another 14 mil bolt up here that you'll use a ratcheting wrench for both of those typically. And then you have that one bolt right there that you can see. And then you have the one on the very top that is the ground strap for your battery harness. If you have any issues with this one, pull your battery and you can actually see it from like up there in the engine bay without the battery in place. We now got all of our bell housing bolts out. So now it's time to wrestle the trans out. So we're gonna grab by the trans mount back here in this area. We're just gonna wiggle it. And as we wiggle, we're gonna pull. Now for any of you guys who are doing this in like a driveway or gravel, I'll show you guys my fix for this in a moment. Let it down a little bit so we can continue to pull it back. And as you keep pulling it back, just keep dropping the tail shaft or the transmission a little bit until we can get it to drop past that clutch, which I believe we just did. So now I set my jack up where it just slowly comes down. I'm gonna use my foot so I can guide this on its way down to the concrete. Basically, you're just gonna sit here and balance it on your jack until you can get it to seat on the ground so it doesn't roll off on you. But if you do have dowels between your block and transmission, this will come out like not that easy. All right, bell housing touchdown. Let's lift the trans up. Slide the jack out from under it. And just like that, our transmission is removed. Everything's done underneath the car now, so it's all up from here, literally. So I've probably done this 20 times without having concrete or any of this, especially the transmission part. Literally 20 plus times at my old shop. It's possible. If you're in gravel and you can't roll your jack, how can you get it to roll? A, you can grab some thicker plywood or some kind of sheet wood that you can put underneath so it will roll straight. All you need is to go forward and backwards. I just got lucky with this one. It came when we bought our house, like when my mom bought her house, it was just in the barn. But this is literally like a beer mat. Because over here on one of the corners, it says property of Boston Beer. Now, I have no idea where this came from, but it's about maybe a 2 millimeter to 4 millimeter at most thick sheet of just plastic. Using that on the gravel allows me to roll my jack, and I can remove the transmission like that. Now, keep in mind, I do this with this caveman style jack, not even the one with the good casters on it, just the full roller. Odds are a lot of times you're gonna have to lift the front to clear the bell housing right here, unless you get lucky and can pull it on the inside of the frame, kind of roll it around. But we're just gonna get the trans, all of our tools, everything out from underneath the car. We're actually gonna lower it down because we don't need it all the way up in the air like this. All we need the front is to be on this wood. So we'll be back in just a moment. We're back on the ground and we're ready to get to work. We actually forgot one thing back here, and that is our alternator to transmission wiring. You're gonna have just a couple push clips, single wire. This pretty much controls all of your dash or cluster function. And then you have your 2 power wires down here. They'll have a black and a blue one, like that. And they each go to the corresponding connector. And now for the banjo bolt. This is a 24 millimeter bolt. And I don't know if you guys can tell, that's not red fluid. We do not have the correct power steering fluid installed. Now I did just confirm that our new hose kit has a reinforced power steering line, so I'm actually gonna cut this one. Now it's coming time to put the chain on our plenum. I like to run them on the runner just because it's more solid and even, and you got a little more peace of mind. The trick here is to kind of run them straight across. So we're gonna run it from here to this one. So basically you want the same chain that goes up and over the hoist or in the hoist hook to be the same chain that runs right here. And then you want it to loop through the other side and this side to loop through here. So that means you're gonna have the straightest baseline with that chain. If not, it's gonna be crooked and you're constantly gonna be turning because that chain, unless you have a different hoist, doesn't wanna turn. Grab it and then pull it the rest of the way through. Now we got us some bolts and some washers, literally just a bell housing bolt. Put some tension on the chain, and I put the bolt a couple links up. So now we're gonna do the same thing over here, and then we'll begin to hook up the engine hoist. Now we're all hooked up, and we're ready to pull it out. With our alternator to transmission harness also disconnected by one of these little clips here, where you gotta fold one side back and pop it through a little hole. The only thing that we have not touched is that AC. So now we're actually going to pull the dipstick out because as you can see the dipstick usually is on the opposite side of the wiring harness, so it's going to get in the way. Or you can just move it over and then put the dipstick back in. Pull it forward or towards the front as far as you can before you start lifting it to get it kind of straight up and down. Before we get too crazy, we did disconnect these heater core hoses. So now we're gonna have to work a flathead in them to get them off. Now that we got those pulled off, we're just gonna check, make sure everything's out of the way. And we can begin to start lifting it out. Now that we're up, we can start to begin to remove our AC compressor. So we have that one 14 mil bolt right there on the front. We also have one here in the back. There's also two right here on the bottom. Once you remove them, the AC compressor will come completely off the bracket, and you can just kind of tuck it and leave it down in its position and bring the rest of the engine up. On a Z32, ratcheting wrenches are your best friend. You can see here, move the engine, AC compressor stays down on the bottom. So now we can continue to pull this out. And right here, we get a little bit better of a shot for you guys on that electrical connector that I was telling you about. Turns out ours didn't even have a clip. Looks like we got one vacuum hose up here for the carbon canister. Yeah, I usually delete all this stuff, so I usually don't even know to look for that. I think our final thing before we pull this out is we have a bracket right here, just like this, that's right here. So you have one 10 mil to pull, and then you can remove this battery harness from the engine. And we should not have anything else after that holding us up. So the only thing that's going to get in the way is our transmission dust shield or dust plate. Well, Matt, I know you're watching, at least at some point. Your engine is finally pulled. Let's check the time real quick. I had this little poll up on Instagram. I had 4 hours, 8 hours, and not today as an option. And right now, for any of you guys who don't believe me over on Instagram when I post here shortly, check it out. 4 hours, 17 minutes of pure work time. With this being a car I've never worked on, that I haven't put together, that has everything stock and whatnot, I'm baffled that it came together or apart that fast. So things definitely came together today in general. For this portion, we're just going to throw in a clutch alignment tool so we can pull our clutch off, then our flywheel, and then we can put this thing on the stand. We can finish out the video. Guess this one just wants to come on. And then your alignment tool should keep the clutch in place. So now we can pull this out, and there's that. And we can come pull our flywheel bolts. If you don't have an impact, put a breaker bar on the crank bolt with a 27 mil socket to keep it from turning as you pull these off and crank them loose. I guess we'll just use a mallet and see if we can walk it off. Yeah, it's starting to move. Ah, there we go. Wow, that's soaking wet behind there. What in the world? Oh yeah. That's bad. What in the world? Yeah, whole lot of cleaning to be done here. Before this goes on the stand, we're gonna pull this dust shield off. Grab the engine stand. Now we're just gonna thread each of these bolts into the block and mount our engine stand. Got them all in place now. Just gonna snug them up. We should be good to put it on its own weight. I guess we get to pull the hoist back, and let's move this engine over here. We're now fully positioned, ready to get to work. We got all of our timing, gasket, new stuff ready over here, engine mounts. Now we're not starting that this video. I know you guys want me to, but we're gonna have to wait. Next video, probably be a full tear down. Maybe the next video, a full reseal. Maybe the tear down will involve all the cleaning. I don't know. I still don't know how to put all this, and I really just want to show you guys everything so you guys just have no guesswork in this and pretty much make a guide for dummies. Not that I'm calling you a dummy. Thank you guys for watching. I think we're going to wrap the video up here. Sorry if you guys have seen those weird lights sometimes in my videos, like the lines and whatnot. It's from these new lights. I need to get more like this one that Chris gave me worked and wired up, and we won't really have to worry about that issue anymore. But for now, just bear with me. I hope it's much easier to see. It definitely is for me. Matt's car is coming along nicely. We did notice a couple things in here other than it just being in general very, very grimy. With the power steering running the wrong fluid, we're gonna have to check into the rack, make sure that's all good. Probably do some rack bushings while we're in here, just so we don't ever have to worry about doing that. However, over here we found, from this Brakemaster replacement, I'm gonna have to guess, all this spilled brake fluid has blistered this paint and has it surface rusting, starting to crust through. So we're gonna knock all that down, try to like eliminate it, and then reseal it, coat it, and get it to where it's not gonna get worse for Matt. And also at the same time, we found us a little nest under the battery tray. We're gonna clean that out, coat that up a little bit, you know, help prolong the life of this Z. Overall, this Z is in amazing condition. Underneath, pinch welds are perfect. This is the Z to have. So you got a really nice car, Matt, and I'm happy to be working on your Z and getting you squared away. Thank you guys again for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe down below. It really helps the channel, helps bump us up in the algorithm, and helps us grow, and in turn, bring more Z content and cooler stuff if we can fund it. Thank you guys, and until next time, peace.